So if you happen to have a Sidur Lev Shalem available at home, or some other edition of Pirkei Avot, we are going to continue with chapter 3, and I'm going to ponder how to address the request with regard to liturgy at some point in the not too distant future. So the statement that I want to make sort of a change. Most of what we've experienced in chapters 1 and 2 has been sort of a chronological presentation of material where scholars of one generation passed knowledge to the next generation, to the next. And occasionally we would double or triple up on particular scholars or sages who were especially well thought of and well respected. Chapter 3, on the surface, and not just on the surface, in reality, chapter 3 and following does not have that same organizing principle, as we'll discover along the way. Some chapters are more, it's like chapter 4 is built around collections of Mishnayot that deal with various numbers. There are 4 X's, blah, 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 blah. And then we have a bunch of Mishnayot about that. There are 10 utterances or 10 X's, and I give you a bunch of Mishnayot with regard to that. Chapter 3 will discover the organizing principle perhaps as we go along, but it opens with a teaching by Akavia ben Mehalalel. And before I read his teaching, I want to tell you a little bit about him, because his backstory, I think, gives us some interesting insight into what he is going to say. So Akavia is mentioned in several other places in rabbinic literature. Perhaps the most intriguing is a Mishnah in Eduyot, in which the Mishnah kind of records Akavia's deathbed conversation with his sons and talks about something that had been a defining and ongoing event and reality in Akavia's life. There were apparently, at one point, several matters of Jewish law under discussion, and the debate went on. Akavia had one clear position on the subject based on the traditions that he had learned from his teachers. And so he's like, yeah, this is not just my idea. This is what I know from the people who taught me. And understand that essentially what he's asserting is that this, having learned it from my teachers, is what I believe God wants, right? We're talking about God's law, and we're trying to figure out what it is. And, knowing that I got this from my teacher tells me that this is the correct expression of divine law. The majority, however, did not agree with him, and Akavia remained adamant in his position. The majority tried to encourage him to join the majority, and he refuses, right? He refuses, even though they offer to appoint him as the head of the Sanhedrin, the national court, if he is willing to relinquish his minority opinion. What's not clear entirely is, at what point minority positions came to be more valued than they were at this moment, right? Akavia resists the pressure, preferring to go with his conscience, if you will, and he ends up being excommunicated by his colleagues. This is not the only story of a rabbi who is adamant about his position in the face of the majority, who runs afoul of his colleagues. But, and this is where I'm not sure exactly when the transition happens, we know that by the time of Rabbi Yehuda, the guy who compiles the Mishnah that we have, minority opinions have become much more valued, such that he records them. You know, if I didn't want, you know, if I disapproved of minority opinions, so much so that I wanted to coerce people to change their minds, I wouldn't include the minority position in a record of rabbinic decision making. The closest equivalent that I can come up with, and I recognize it's imperfect, is we, as a matter of practice, not only record the majority opinions of Supreme Court decisions, we also preserve concurring opinions and dissenting opinions, right? And they're all collected together in order to provide a full understanding of the issue as it was debated, discussed, and determined. And we know that there will be times when the court will revisit an issue and may, in fact, reverse the previous majority. And all of a sudden, what had been a minority position may suddenly just find itself in the ascendancy, which is the same reason Rabbi Yehuda and others of his era assert the need to preserve minority positions, because there may be change that is necessary, and these could form precedent. Right? But we're not there yet. Right? So Akavia, by sticking to his views, is excommunicated, and he's now on his deathbed, and he has an odd or unexpected conversation with his son.
Was he excommunicated from the group of scholars, or
yes,
but not from the,
not completely from the community,
yeah,
but he was intellectual persona non grata. Right? So he's having this moment with his son. His son is never named in the rabbinic literature, and his father is recalling the events that led to his excommunication, and you sort of expect that after he's done telling the story to his son, he would conclude with, "And son, that's why, no matter the cost, you should always stick to your beliefs and hold fast to your positions." That would sort of like seem like a logical conclusion. That's not what he says. All right? Instead, he says to his father, tell him that his son should recant from all of the positions that his father holds, which he had held on to for years despite the great cost. And the son is now going, wait, you want me to just sort of go against everything you've been saying for all these decades? And dad says, yep, that's what I want you to do. And Akavia has to explain to his son why. And his answer is not kind in some ways. One, I get to hold these positions because of the time I spent studying with my teachers, from whom I inherited this, and from whom I came to believe that this is exactly what God wants. You, however, are only doing it to honor me. That's not a good enough reason to resist the majority, given the fact that, generally speaking, Akavia would agree with the idea in rabbinic literature that the law is based on the position of the majority of sages. And then he kind of goes even further to say that you should never stand only on your own personal position, or that you have from only one person, as opposed to me, who had it from my teachers as a collective group. And by the way, I'm not really giving you a recommendation to the rabbinic world because you haven't earned it. In other words, he basically says to his son, I earned the right to be me and stand in opposition because of the dutiful nature by which I studied Torah. You're just coasting. You're coasting on my reputation, good, bad, or indifferent, and you're trying to use it as a springboard into the rabbinic community. And no, I refuse to allow that. All right, so it's a very fascinating end of life scenario, not very much what we expected, both in terms of its negation of what he had done in his own life and telling his son, no, don't do that. And by the way, everything is only on your own merit. Right? You can't ride my coattails into a good rabbinic position.
And we didn't have much of a coattail to ride, did he? I mean, if he was.
But think about the fact that he was esteemed enough by his colleagues that they were willing, in order to get his agreement, to make him the head of the Sanhedrin.
Okay.
Right? If this was Ellenberg being an iconoclast, they would have gone, who the heck cares? It's not like if the law committee says something and I say, yeah, I don't think so. The law committee would go like, okay, you don't have to think so, but this is the way it is. You're just, quote, on the wrong side of this one.
Now, did he hold? We don't know, but did he hold his minority position simply because that is what has been recorded from his teachers or from the past, or was it because he saw in the issue something that he apparently did not debate or talk about, that he himself?
Okay, so
is it he himself, or is it just?
No, he always couched it as, this is what I believe God truly wants based on what I learned from my teachers as a cohort. Now, the reality is that in the rabbinic world, we all have teachers and mentors who help form and shape how we look at issues. And that can truly, I don't want to say limit our perspective, but it certainly can influence our perspective. When I was at JTS, one of the most significant influences on me in terms of how I look at Jewish law was Rabbi Joel Roth. He should live and be well. And whenever I approach a halachic question, part of me hears his voice in my head defining not the answer to the question, but the process by which I will approach finding the answer to the question. Right? But that can sometimes be very I don't want to say circumscribed, but it definitely presents parameters, and it is different from the manner in which Gordon Tucker approached halachic issues. And I'm not saying that one is better or worse, but I don't step into Gordon's model of how you approach it. I step into Joel's model of how you approach it. And that can almost inevitably at times bring you to different conclusions.
There might be a context difference in terms of how.
So, and all, so for our purposes, it's important to understand and appreciate that Akavia is a product of his teachers and their perspective and their rulings. And on one level, he's saying, I get to affirm that because this is what I got from them. You, my son, can't just do it because I said so. Right? And that, Akavia was willing to make all sorts of sacrifices for the principles that he upheld and believed in. Right? And at the same time, we see both the emphasis in rabbinic literature on the rule of the majority, which comes up at various times. And on one level, here on his deathbed, Akavia is affirming that you should go with the rule of the majority because that's what he's telling his son to do. So that's kind of the sort of the background to our little Mishnah here. Okay, so let's go to the Mishnah, chapter 3, verse 1. And if you're looking at a Lev Shalem Sidur, it's on page 243. Akavia ben Mahalalel liked to say, consider these three things and you will not fall into transgression. Know whence you came, whither you are going, and before whom you will eventually give an accounting. Right? We've seen this idea of be mindful of three things as a way of avoiding sin way back in chapter 2. All right. The difference is Akavia's answer is very starkly different. All right, and then he elaborates, from whence you came, from a putrid drop, whither you are going, to a place of dust, worm, and maggots, and before whom you will eventually have to give an accounting before the sovereign of the sovereigns of sovereigns, the Blessed Holy One. Okay, so what's Akavia trying to teach us?
Well, it's pretty scary. I mean, he's really saying, look at your physicality. I mean, you came from a putrid drop, and then he asked about the destination, and he said the destination of the body, but not the soul, might add, is a place of dust, worms, and maggots. Okay,
so basically it's look at your own mortality,
right,
which is a place most of us don't like to look very often. All right. And by the way, how we look at the beginning of life and the end of life can vary tremendously, right? Imagine now, right, so he's got this, you come from a putrid drop, right? Like you come from a little drop of semen. Okay, it's junk, virtually. All right. Now, to compare that to the rabbinic teaching, which says, who are responsible for the creation of a human being? Father, mother, and God. right? Each a parent contributes their physical stuff, and God infuses the soul. But just in formulating it that way, the physical stuff that comes from mom and dad is equal, if you will, in that statement to what you get from God. It's equally essential. It's not like, oh, you just bring putrid to the, no, you bring this and you bring that, and they're essential, and God completes the process. That's a very different perspective, right? So I don't want to say that, Akavia might have been a bit of a downer, but he's certainly much more heavy,
Yeah.
right? Right? And end of life, also, it's like, great, okay, where do you end up? It's like that old song that from when you were a kid. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. They eat your guts and they spit them out. That was like a lovely little ditty, but it's not a real happy image. Okay. And then the part of you that survives, guess what? It goes on trial.
It's the problematic part.
But look, that's standard operating procedure in afterlife, most afterlife theology.
Maybe, or most. I'm not sure who most includes, but yeah.
Well, certainly Jewishly, there's this idea of being giving accounting for one's behavior. Look, there's a reality that there are multiple times when we are called to account. We do it annually on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Because this whole judgment scene is what plays out in the liturgy. I realize that very often when we do Unetana Tokef, that paragraph, people are busy focused on how much their feet hurt because they've been standing for a while. But if you actually focus on the liturgy, it's all about how you are called before the divine judge, and all of your actions, positive and negative, are there to testify either for you or against you. And the judge, the Holy One, will make a determination as to whether you go into the book of life or not. So that model, that we sort of embed in our liturgy for the High Holy Days is equally true at the end of life, where that happens, but now it's not an annual review, it's a lifetime achievement award.
But doesn't the Onetana Tokef end with, but these things can be mitigated by repentance?
Yes, while you're alive. All right.
Okay.
Now, the truth is they can be mitigated also in the afterlife if you've accumulated enough of them.
Oh, okay, so we're talking about a quantity now.
Well, you can look at it quantitatively, or you can look at it how shall I say it, in a sort of a combination of qualitative and quantitative, in that perhaps not all mitzvot are equally valued. So it's like taking a test. This question is worth 5 points. That question is worth 10 points. The essay questions are worth 25 points because there's more there. Though the Torah tries to emphasize the idea that you shouldn't think about it in those terms, because God is, I don't want to say fickle, but the reward for any given mitzvah is rarely stated. So you don't know whether you're going to get more brownie points for doing this than for doing that.
And we saw that in Mishnah too.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Okay, so part of what Akavia, I guess, is trying to tell us is we need to think about our mortality a little bit. And then the question becomes, to what point, what purpose? And why does he emphasize our lowly origins as opposed to you are think about what we read just a couple weeks ago in Shul about the creation of human beings. You're created in the image of God.
Yeah, but we didn't quite define that down to the detail.
No, but that's a much more positive
Right.
image than you
Yeah.
came from some putrid drop. And you know, if it wasn't that putrid drop, it would have been some other putrid drop. It's not exactly like a. This is not like a ringing endorsement of peoplehood. Yes, Arnie. Arnie, you're muted. Hold on.
I'm unmuting. Okay, now you can hear me.
Okay. Yes.
All right, I got 613 commandments. Okay, which one's it's number one is going to guarantee you that you get to level 1 in heaven. Here's number 2, we'll get you to level 2. Now the problem is nobody gave me the formula, so I didn't know what the top 10 were. You remind me of when I took a Civil War history class and I walked into it and she says, "Oh, he asked a lot of questions about the railroads." Well, I didn't know that because I lived in the dorm. I wasn't a fraternity in the system. So how do you resolve this whole thing when you have this judgment, but I don't know what the basis of the judgment is, and I don't know what the weight of each one of those items are?
There, ergo, I need to attempt to accomplish it all or as much of it as possible. Recognizing that, you know, we talk about 613 mitzvot a lot. Let me reassure everyone that at least a couple hundred of them are attached to things related to the temple and agriculture in the land of Israel. And once you prune it down, it's probably about half that. Okay, so that makes life a lot easier. And then there are things that you're supposed to do, and there are things that you are not supposed to do. And some are easier than others. It's like, you shall not murder. I don't have a whole lot of trouble with that one. Despite how angry certain people may get me, that's not something that I consider to be a concern in my life because I don't see myself doing that to another human being. There are others that might be more challenging than others, depending on definitions and stuff. And then some of them are situational. It's like you have an obligation to return the lost animal of someone you know, or a member of your community. Well, what if you don't find the lost animal? You're not obligated to go looking for lost animals, but if you find one, you have an obligation to help return the lost animal or the lost object, right? So that may come up sometimes. You know, we've all found something and we go, oh, let me see if there's an ID in it or something. We make some proper effort to try to get it back to the original owner, right? But that's not a daily, weekly. I mean, I don't remember the last time I found something specifically, right? So there are a lot. Once you get into the situational stuff, there are not, you prune away even more. So the question becomes, to what degree do I have to do them? And do I say, well, since they're only situational, maybe they're not worth as much as the ongoing ones? Or maybe because they're so rare, maybe I get more points for doing them because they're so rare. And the answer is, I don't know. The goal of the whole structure and system is to get me to do the right thing.
Yeah, but is it is a very sort of a numerical approach to the whole idea. I mean, you don't, who thinks that, okay, well, let's see, I've got these choices today, whether I'll do this or that one.
Well, because
so forth. I mean,
the presumption is that you're going to try to do as many mitzvot as possible. So, for example,
yeah,
if you're committed to the system, if you will, if you're committed to Jewish life, then you sort of say, okay, in the morning I get up and I daven, and in the afternoon I daven, and in the evening I daven, and I say blessings before and after doing certain things. And it's not that, oh, I need to hit a number. It's more I aspire to a lifestyle which is guided by these principles.
right, I agree.
So I don't know that most people are thinking, oh, well, let's see. The rabbi said I need to do 100 blessings today. How many have I gotten to?
Yeah.
It's because on one level, that whole idea is more meant to be aspirational, so that, before you chow down on your donut, you say a bracha, because it's like, oh, okay, I should sort of express a measure of appreciation, gratitude. I saw that hand.
Well, the
Go
hand,
ahead, Ari.
you said that you had two great teachers and you follow the formula of one teacher versus the other. And they come up with two different conclusions. So therefore, if I took Gordon, that's his first name,
Yep.
which is the one you do.
No, I actually, Gordon was one of my teachers. He was not one of my mentors.
Who was the other one you mentioned?
Joel Roth was one.
Joel, okay.
Joe Brody was another.
Well, no, I'm just taking. I for this example, I only need the top two. So if
Okay.
you follow Joel, but you don't follow Gordon. So here I go all the way. It's the end of my life, and I'm expecting, because I got a ticket to heaven because I've got the Gordon ticket, and I don't have the Joel ticket. And the person says, "You've got the wrong ticket. You don't get in."
See, I don't know that Akavia is worried about that, and I don't know that I'm particularly worried about it. I use it only as a way of illustrating the fact that the people who mentor us also shape our thinking, and that's
True.
going to affect how we do halacha and other things.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
so I'm not as worried about, whether I punched the right ticket or not. Okay. So I think part of the question is, what's the purpose for a kavya about contemplating our mortality and our somewhat lowly origins, right? Rambam, Maimonides, argues that reflecting on our beginnings and our endings is meant to cultivate humility and detachment from worldly concerns. I shouldn't be worried about my affluence as much as I should my ethics. By the way, Rambam talking about humility is always a bit amusing, because humility is not one of the things that he was particularly known for.
Inspector Poirot.
Right. So on one level, it's about trying to get us to focus away from the worldly and pay more attention to spiritual concerns. Bartanura, just who's one of the he's an Italian biblical Mishnah commentator, I should say, and yes, it is for him that wines are named, because he was a vintner way back when. And he says the purpose of remembering our humble beginnings is to combat pride, and contemplating our end reduces our pursuit of desires because we have a fear of judgment. I'm not sure I like him. as a response. I don't find it particularly uplifting because I don't want to go through life in this state of
Fear.
fear. Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Sam.
Yeah, I think what I'm thinking about is that our life is more than, it's not just one physicality or the other spirituality. It's all kind of, it's integrated to one person. Okay, so presumably, I don't know if this is anybody's model, at death, the who you are, I guess, is separated from that, the body, and there's we call it spirituality or whatever, the soul. I
So
don't know. I mean, there seems to, there'd be no reason, I would say, to get so hung up on counting this or that or being, because that denies the fact that we are one
okay,
integrated.
don't get too caught up in the numerical part of it.
Okay. Yeah,
Because I don't think Akavia is sort of is looking at it that way per se, as much as what is your lifestyle ambition? You know, what do you aspire to in your life? Bill.
You're
You are
muted, Bill.
you're still muted, guys.
Sorry, it took a while.
There you go.
All right, Bill.
Yeah, with what Arnie was mentioning about the mitzvahs, I was thinking, well, we don't have to rank them as such, Rabbi. What is more important, the positive mitzvahs or the negative ones?
That's
What you're
right.
not supposed to do?
I think it somewhat depends on what the mitzvah is. So, for example, all right, I'm going to come back to our old friend murder. Right? Is not murdering someone more or less valuable than honoring your parents?
Never
Right.
thought of it before. Wow.
Those are, and they're right next to each other, which is kind of helpful in choosing them. One is very much a very powerful negative. I mean, the taking of another life is considered a horrible act. Right? Honoring one's parents is considered a very lofty, powerful act, but nigh unto impossible to completely fulfill. Right? One is a momentary versus an ongoing activity. Do I get, okay, so far I've made it to this point in my life and I've not killed anybody. Do I get points for every year that I didn't kill somebody? I don't know. I don't think so. On the other hand, did I start with 100% credit on honoring parents and lose points every time I didn't quite get it right? So I don't like to sort of think about it in that kind of quantitative way, as much as there are things in life that I should absolutely avoid. And there are things in life that I should absolutely aspire to at all times, recognizing that I may not always avoid everything that I ought to avoid, but can I fix or atone for those? Nor will I always achieve everything to which I aspire on the positive side, but that doesn't mean I don't keep aspiring.
So where was Javier on that particular point? Or do we know, or does it?
Right now, you know what I know about what
Okay.
Akavia ben Mahalalel said, right? but it's clear for him, and this idea that we need to reflect on our limitations, I guess, and that we are not without accountability. Plus, I've always sort of felt that of all the judges in the universe, the Holy One might be the best one to go in front of, because God ought to have all the information, and I'm gonna guess is gonna be a little bit kinder than most judges we are going to encounter.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. I think a corollary to the question in our Mishnah, is if Akavia seems to belittle to some degree our physical origins and endings. But it does raise the question of what is the nature of the human soul,
Yes.
and what happens to it after death. There's a whole lot of debate as to what the answer to that question is. But I want to share with you two interesting ideas, or two ideas that I found interesting. Maybe I should phrase it that way rather than, because you may hear both of them and go like, eh. Okay, so the first is from Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein, who is the author of Aruch HaShulchan, in which he articulates the belief that the soul is like a precious stone, which is placed in a palace, but it is there only temporarily until it returns to God. And the palace is merely the structure in which that precious stone is housed. Okay, now, what happens to the precious stone while it's in residence? Well, I guess for Rabbi Yechiel Michal Epstein, it might depend somewhat on what kind of a housekeeper you are. All right. We have all, over the years, encountered people who have better and worse housekeeping skills. Right? And that affects how we react to being in their space, but it also affects the things that are in their space. Right? So the idea translated then is, if the soul is this precious stone, to what degree do I take good care of it? Do I polish it regularly? We have, in our house, we have some silver that most of it that we inherited. I don't think we've actually ever bought any of it. All right. But what happens when you just let it sit? It tarnishes. And the more regularly you polish it, the easier it is to get it clean. And the longer it sits, getting more and more tarnished, the harder it is to get it untarnished. But when you look at it after you've just polished it, you're going like, oh, wow, that's really shiny. That looks like new. Right? And you feel a sense of, oh, yay.
Right. So polishing would be
It would be doing those things that are aspirationally positive. Studying Torah, doing mitzvot, doing things that, so how do you polish the soul? Right? And how do you tarnish the soul? Yeah, and the answer, I guess, to Rabbi Yechiel Michel is you can tarnish the soul in two ways. You can actively tarnish it by doing bad acts, or you can tarnish it by inaction,
Right.
in the same way that, none of us go and try to tarnish the silver cup that's sitting in the bright front. It just happens naturally over time when we don't actively polish it.
Right. So, being the engineer that I am, I'm thinking about a machine, which is, parts, metal, this, that, and the other. But you have to put some fuel in that machine or energy into that machine, which I'll relate to the soul, to get an outcome, which is a productivity of some kind that you're looking for.
Okay.
That's the way, yeah, I think, I don't know, that's the way I see it.
Okay, but the flip
It's-
side is, or to use your machine analogy, your car has a motor, yes?
Oh, yeah, yeah, and I can define that motor down to the nth,
Uh-huh.
thing,
And
but the
what happens if you don't put,
with the energy in it.
well, not just the energy in, what if you don't put engine cleaner through it periodically? What if you don't flush the system? It's like,
Right.
that's an inaction, but it can have really horrible consequences.
Right, but I mean, I'm just kind of related to
Oh,
this soul body kind of
Mhm.
discussion we're having. You've got to put energy in, and no one today, the most brilliant person can define energy in its essence, because takes different forms.
Okay,
And
good.
It's just the same way we can't define God, or we cannot define maybe even soul. Or we
Okay,
can't agree to it anyway.
but I think I can make it simpler, which is your motor, it doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Definitely not.
It's part of your car. All right, so what if Mr. Yankel washes his car dutifully every Sunday and polishes it, and it sparkles and it shines and it looks
Looks good.
as good as it did the day he bought it,
Yeah.
but doesn't put engine cleaner into his car?
So he's not going to get the output that he's looking
Well, not just that, the car is going to die because the engine will become clogged, the whole transmission will get ruined, the whole
Yeah.
thing will.
Well, in essence, you're changing that physicality. I mean, because you're putting more
Right,
junk
so
into it. So, but I mean, but I can define that. I know what the waste is that's forming inside, and I can send it to the chemist and find out what kind of things.
But ultimately, I don't care. No, I mean, seriously, if my car is on the side of the road because I didn't put the proper things into it, I don't send it to the chemist.
Yeah.
I don't care why it's just broken.
Yeah.
Arnie,
Yeah.
Rabbi,
Argument, I just.
Sam, are you finished? I'll wait for you.
I'm sorry.
You're still talking, and I didn't want to cut in.
No, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay. I don't like the metaphor.
which one?
A variety of them. Because I can't remember them all, please.
Equal opportunity.
I think you do it because you want to. I'll give more to food bank this month than I normally do because of the stupid thing dealing with the shutdown. I'm not expecting there to be a bell to be ringing. Okay. I'm not playing the pinball machine now. I don't see how many points are getting up there. I just do it because I think it ought to be done. I'm certainly not expecting anything to come from above and the voice going like, Arnold, you're a good boy. Keep it up. I don't. I think in Judaism, you do what you do because it's the right thing to do without having the bells and whistles and without having the reward. With regard to the one earlier where I love the quote, is where did you begin doesn't dictate where you're going to end. And a lot of people boo-hoo themselves because where they started, where they were at, as if it's sort of like an albatross. Because do you know where I come from? Do you know who my folks were? Da 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 da. But where you're going is because you have some sort of goal or reason for doing this in your whole life. in your whole life. I mean, an example I give you now, I'm 85 years of age. I'm in hospice. Why the heck am I getting a class on from the rabbi? I mean, what's it basically doing? And you know what it's doing? As Sam and I would talk about before, because it keeps our minds active, it keeps us going, it keeps us thinking, and I love a new thought there. So I think you need to answer those two questions. Where you begins does not dictate your life. But where you're going is important because you have some idea of which road you're going to take. It's sort of like Frost, the road less taken. You take it because it's the right thing to do, not because everybody else is doing it. Otherwise, I'd have a Taylor Swift bracelet on.
Though, no, you know, the flip side is you kind of hope or wish that everybody were taking that positive path. Because that's a presumption of Torah and rabbinic literature.
But you see, in response to that, Rabbi, Sam Perucci is Sam Perucci. He does not think the same way I do. All
Thanks
right.
God.
Well, I didn't hear what the line was down below from
I
someone.
said, thanks God.
Okay, because that whole piece there is you do what you do because you believe it's the right thing to do, and in your thought process, this is the way you think it out. And just because Sam does it his way doesn't mean it's wrong or right. It's just it's for Sam, it's a logical process upon which he draws a conclusion. Because otherwise, Sam's going to ask the question, how did you know that that was a fact based upon the following that you drew the conclusions from? And so I think you need to have that sense of individuality. And I think that's why you have God breathes into the nostrils of man the breath of life. It's because each one is unique in and of itself. It's not the same breath of life.
But
I like that.
Is there no collective wisdom or pathway?
There is.
It is because you accepted that way of the pathway, Rabbi, that's why you go that way. I mean, the people that influenced me, because I took history, is okay, where's the background? Where did it come from? Who basically said that this is what happened? And how do they even know? How did Nixon, why did it was in the book that Nixon knelt on the floor and prayed? Who was in the room other than him and Henry Kissinger?
Yeah. I guess the challenge, and this is a challenge perhaps more of modernity, and maybe even I'm gonna leave it as modernity, which is the sense that I am the supreme self, get to make all the determinations. When in point of fact, society defines a lot of things for us, whether Jewish or other.
If you choose to take that path.
No, I don't think you get a choice. That's Plato.
Well, I know Plato's Republic.
Because it's like you live in this country. Ergo, you tacitly accept all the rules and regulations associated with living in this country, whether you like them or not, is not relevant because you also choose to accept all the benefits that accrue with living in this state, in this country, in this place.
Plato would not totally agree with that because he would argue more about character than almost anything else.
Except, no, Plato accepts the decree against him based exactly on that. It's like, I cannot, just because the state now wishes to act against my interest, negate the authority of the state from which I have received so much.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So on one level, yes, I have autonomy of action, but not nearly as much as I sometimes like to think I do. And we're also dealing with the reality of living in a Jewish reality, which is much more voluntary than it was in previous generations.
I think what's missing when I listen to this back and forth is that in terms of, I hope I'm not dragging it away, but we're also, we may or may not know the rules, right? We may not know all the Judaism, okay? But we're going to live a life anyway, right? And we will accumulate as much wisdom and knowledge that we can. But then here's the deal. With a human being, we have desires. Desires come up. Where do they come from? And then you're faced with the idea of free will. Okay, you have a will. You can accept the outcome of that desire, or you can take it. And I think the mitzvot kind of tell us what's the answer to the question, which one you should take. But the fact is, we don't always take the right answer.
True.
Okay? And that's where the life of constant learning and assessing and learning, what is that'll give us. We have that free will. It's like Adam and Eve, and they desire. And you're in this physicality. You're in this garden, and you get this, and this. Don't do this. Well, some desire comes along. I don't know who brought it, the snake or somebody else, but you get a desire. You want, oh wow, that's, I really want, this is something you don't even think about it sometimes. But the question is, if we have been exposed to study the life of trying to understand what the right thing to do is, and seeing sometimes from others the outcome of what they do, we know that's probably not the right choice, but we have to choose. You can't just let it go.
We do have choice, and yes, there are times when we have to choose whether we are going to allow our temptations
Go
to
against,
determine,
right.
or whether we're going to
Right.
override them.
Go against the desire.
The one emendation that I might make to what you said, Sam, is not knowing the rules does not necessarily obviate our responsibility. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I
all right,
agree with you.
all right. Let me end with one quick thought. Right, because I said there were two thoughts that sort of I came across while I was preparing, and the second one is by Rabbi Yeshaya Halevi Horowitz, who likened the soul to entering the world naked. In other words, the soul is placed in us, right? And it's up to us to develop the character and spiritual qualities before the soul has to return to God. It's if you will, the soul is a clean slate.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is neutral. And
Tabula
before returning it, we have to clothe it. And how well dressed it is up to us. And maybe, it can make an appearance on the TV show, What Not to Wear. But actually, that could be a very funny Purim Torah thing. What not to wear for the soul. All right. That's all for today. It's good to see everyone. Hopefully, the weather will be a little more cooperative next Tuesday. And I imagine I will see some of you before, but hopefully I will see all of you next week.